And we're live. All right. Hey, we're back. Welcome to Insights of All Trades. We are on episode, I keep forgetting. You literally just told me.
I believe we are on 14.
Okay, episode number 14. It's been a little bit since we've seen each other. We started school back up. You're on fall break, right?
I am, yeah. So get a few days off. Gotta go back early for the wrestling season starting up. So have practice this weekend. So super excited.
Dang, feels early.
Yeah.
October.
I think October 10th every year is like the first day you're allowed to practice. So Coach Laudenschlager was actually kind enough to not make us stay all of fall break and give us a few days to come home. So yeah, up until now it's just all been preseason captain practices stuff.
Okay, nice. Sounds good. So you were leading some of those, right? Because you're the captain.
Yeah, the freshmen probably hate me right now.
Yeah.
I never had captain's practices have the team runs get pulled before. So I'll take that as a compliment, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
That we just changed them all to wrestling because the team run turnout started to dwindle.
Nice. Sounds good. So I just took my renal final today, so I'm back for the weekend, but we don't get a fall break, unfortunately. But we got to squeeze a podcast.
Med school must be so hard that you don't get a fall break.
Yeah. Anyways, so I'm home. We get to squeeze a podcast in here real quick, which is nice. We got to hit up Tyler Gilson, who's on the show today. Awesome conversation. He's a cool guy. I think everyone's really going to enjoy it. Now, we don't really have an insight for you right now. We're starting like a new switch on what we're doing with the insights. So and we just kind of posted that a little while ago. So send us those insights that you have, and we'll feature you at the beginning of the show. What else should we cover here before? You got some new glasses?
Kind of. So they aren't prescription glasses, but they're like blue light glasses. So they will reflect. I think these ones are like the Gunner brand of blue light glasses. Anyway, they'll reflect like 65-ish% of blue light. So if you're looking at screens at night before you go to bed, I often want to wear them all day unless I know I'm going to be looking at a screen for a while, but especially in the couple hours before I go to bed, I'll throw them on if I know I'm going to be looking at a laptop screen or my phone screen.
Funny, because what we call like super go hard med students, people that are like studying all day, every day, all the time, we call them gunners. So you got a gunner glasses so you can stay up and study all night.
I aspire to be one of the gunners.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, I mean, I aspire to also be a gunner. I haven't been able to completely fulfill that role, but it is kind of something that's necessary because with boards coming up pretty soon, I'm really going to have to study a lot. And like you said, med school is so hard. But yeah, so anything else you think we should cover? Do you want to introduce Tyler to everybody?
Yeah, of course. So Tyler Gilson, he's a DPT, so he's a practicing physical therapist in this area, but he hasn't always been practicing physical therapy in this area. He was in Alaska for a while, so we got to talk about some cool stories from that. Also, his background is that how I got to know Tyler is we're both very into wrestling, so he was a good wrestler both in high school, was on a state champ team, wrestled in college, and has kind of helped coach some young people, including me when I was in high school, and yeah. Pretty cool. Also,
he's just got a lot of just general life experience. It seems, especially for somebody so young as him, like he just seems like he's got it down. So it is a cool conversation.
We go off on some cool tangents, talk about his triathlon training and hunting
and dieting and all sorts of stuff. So it's a cool episode. Hope you guys enjoy. Yeah, stay tuned.
Welcome to Insights of All Trades podcast with Nick and Cole. This is where we talk with people we meet along our journeys through medicine, military service, sports, education, and beyond. We hope you enjoy. All right, Tyler Gilson, what's up, dude?
Hey, how you doing?
Super happy to have you on. So the last time I was with Tyler, we were rolling around in the wrestling room, and one thing led to another. Was it your college roommate that was with us as well?
Or no, it's my sister's boyfriend.
Oh, your sister's boyfriend. Yeah. But he wrestled as well in college.
He's, stud jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So he was beating me up a little bit for the better, and one thing led to another. Got in kind of a weird situation, and I hurt my ankle, and still not sure because I didn't get like an MRI or anything on whether it was just a sprain. I forget if it's like, are there like type 1 and type 2 or something like that? Like there's tiers that lead to
They
like
grade them. Yeah.
like
1 through 3.
partial tears. And I was told by the physician I saw that there's a good chance it was partially tore, but if I wasn't planning on getting surgery, then there was no point in like paying for the MRI. So I was on crutches for about 2 weeks, and in that time, I went on a pretty long kayak trip that was kind of hard, hobbling around, setting up camp. But I think the most ridiculous thing I did is that I went to watch my friends run a marathon that I was previously signed up for, and I had no intent until like 12 hours beforehand of throwing on the running shoes, and I was maybe 3 or 4 days off crutches. I was like, I think I have like the mental tenacity just to force my legs to run a marathon. So I threw on the running shoes, and you had to hold the course time of under 5 hours, which is really slow. It's like it averages, I want to say, around an 11-ish minute per mile, which is like a slow trot. But my ankle was really bothering me, and I got pulled at mile 21 exactly, a little after mile 21.
21?
Yeah.
You made it that far?
Yeah. At that point, I was just speed limping forward. And I think it was like 4 hours and 40 minutes. And if you have 5.2 miles to go, there's just no way they could take a look at me speed limping forward and think I have any chance at all in making it under 5 hours. So some guy came by on a mule and picked me up. Yeah, that was pretty crazy.
I remember you texted me the night before you were going on it, or going to the marathon, and you asked if I thought it was crazy if you would run that. And I was like, yeah, I don't think that's the best idea after you said you had like this high ankle sprain and everything. But you did it anyways. So.
Yeah, we learned a lot. Got right back on crutches after that for another.
So you went from grade 1 to 3, huh?
Yeah, it's doing well now. So I mean, that's for the better. So for the better for my mind, I guess. So that was the last time we were together. But before we get into the weeds of giving some people some tangible insights about what you do, I wanted to let you kind of tell everyone the story of what it is that you do. So you're a physical therapist. If you could kind of walk us through from PT school to where you are now, just as an overview of your path.
Just the academic portion? So
yeah, whatever you want to go into. If you want to go into like clinical stuff as well, however you want to break it down.
So school? Oh boy, that was a journey. Started out at Slippery Rock. I was there for a year. Transferred from Slippery Rock to Shippensburg. That was like the whole Title IX stuff was going through during that time. 2004 is when it was. So Title IX is equal men and women's sports. So kind of put the university under a pinch to offer at least equal men and women's sports. I was there wrestling at the time, and that wrestling program kind of went under what they called like a review, meaning they don't know if they're going to continue the program or not continue it the following year. So a bunch of guys kind of jump and ship at that point. I was in PT school there, so I transferred to Shippensburg. Shippensburg, went into an exercise science field, finished up my undergraduate work there, went to bachelor's degree in exercise science, and transferred into Lebanon Valley from there with PT as my graduate school. So it's a 3-year degree after that. So there's a couple different pathways you can go with that. There's accelerated pathways. It's a 6-year accelerated or a 7-year program. It's doctorate, clinical doctorate now. Most of them are. I don't even know if there's any that offer a master's now. Went to Lebanon Valley, ended up with it's kind of confusing, but you get another bachelor's before you go on to a doctorate.
Oh, what's that in?
Health sciences.
Oh, so you had like a bachelor's in exercise science and health science.
Health science, and then you go straight into a clinical doctorate.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you're in the DPT program. What do the rotations and stuff look like that you did?
It's similar to like a med school, so you're familiar with that. Like you just have to kind of touch on each one of the clinical settings. It's regulated by what they call CAPD, so the governing body national-wide that kind of governs the academic portion of the schooling. So you have to touch so many hours or weeks. I'm not sure what it is now, but it's some portion of schooling that you have to go in each one of the fields. So like a subacute, acute settings, you have to go to the skilled setting for a little bit. At least our school at the time had required us to do that. I think now they offer, like, if you know you want to go into an outpatient setting, you can take all that time and delegate it all to the outpatient.
What got you interested in PT originally?
Well, actually, that's kind of a funny story. So I have a relative that ran a clinic for Joyner Sports Medicine in Lewistown. That's kind of like right there in 5 Points, they call it. And at the time, she shared an office with Jimmy Martin, who was the overseeing orthopedic. That office, when I was young, I had a wrestling injury, went up there, and he was a 2-time national champ, I believe 2-time, for Penn State, right? So, like, that kind of was like, oh, man, this is awesome. Got to spend some time with Jimmy Martin while he was in the office through my relative. That, I think, put it in my head at the point in time, this is a cool job. She's working with a lot of athletes at the time. But that kind of got the ball rolling in that way, kind of, I guess, the thought in my head. I really didn't have an idea what I wanted to do until you're in high school and you're like, what do you want to go to school for? I like sports. I have a mechanical brain, I think. I had worked construction most of that time. So I see things mechanically, and biology was probably what interested me most going through school. So it was kind of a fit. I was like, yeah, I want to go through PT school. And it really wasn't until my senior year of college, of undergraduate work, until I was like, what the heck am I going to do? I was in sports. It's kind of a sports medicine kind of background at that point in time through sports, and then exercise science degree. Didn't really make a choice until like my senior year of college.
Dang. So
at that point in time, I was not on track. Not at all. So my last 2 semesters of school were like a 24 credit caseload with clinical kind of observation type stuff to get into PT school. But luckily I applied, got in, and then transferred into Lebanon Valley. And that's when you start learning about what the heck a physical therapy really is at that point in time. You have this thought up until that time, and then you started,
Yeah, so this all dates back to high school when you had a wrestling injury.
Yeah.
So I remember in high school you were a great wrestler, and you were part of that state champion team, weren't you?
Yes.
Nice. So what was that like, just, being a part of that?
It was good. You reflect on it like now, back then, and I think back then it was all blur. You don't, at that age, I don't think you're mindful to what all is going on and, what you're exposed to. But it was a kind of a perfect storm at the time. We had a lot of good athletes in general in those classes, and they fed off each other. I don't remember if you remember any of the guys. It was a good time, and I think when you really boil it down, what it came down to is we had some good athletes on the team that were kind of a good mix of natural talent, a couple guys that had a great work ethic, and we had some coaching staff, great guys. A lot of community support back then too. So, Bob Hart, if you want to talk about work ethic, we were
the Jayco legend, Bob Hart.
Yeah. I could talk 3 hours on that alone, but we had Bob kind of at the realm. And as high school kids, I think when you learn best by trying to just simulate somebody else. You try to simulate whatever somebody else is doing that works for them. And at that point in time, this is high school kids, we saw Bob Hart, and he was a workhorse.
Yeah, for those who don't know who Bob Hart is, if you picture like a 6'2" man, that's probably, who knows, when he was coaching that state champ team, he's probably in his 40s already, right?
Yeah, he had to be in his 40s.
And probably walking around at a sub 10% body fat, but above 200 pounds by a large margin. He's a shredded dude.
Just a great guy, just a good role model. And I think that's what you need at that point in time. You need, one, the group of guys that want to put in what it takes, and then you had a guy to, we just simulated. Not only just Bob, Jim Weitzel. We had Darren Weitzel that was helping out. We had a bunch of guys in the background. Jeff Brown, Bob Rolls of Rosewood Kitchen. Jeff Brown's now with Empire. There's a lot of these guys that have just a great work ethic and a lot of community support. We had pretty fortunate with the amount of people that really followed us, and I think we were just kind of fed off of that.
Yeah, I
So it
mean,
was,
speaking for myself, I remember I was in elementary school and following in my whole family, who none of us were like, emotionally involved with the team or like by any means, like we didn't have any like relatives or anything on the wrestling team, but we were all super into it, listening to it on the radio, all sorts of stuff.
hmm
I remember that vividly as one of my childhood memories, just listening to you guys at States. That was crazy.
yeah,
So, like you said, community support was huge with that because I think there were just so many people from the county and all around that were super, super
yeah.
supportive.
I mean, away tournaments, we would have like 3 and 4 buses, like of just community members, family, people that go and take up hotel rooms. It was amazing. Dave Baumberg was big on that. He did a lot for that program, really. Uh, that group of guys, really, he put together a lot of stuff, and I think he kind of was in the background because he's a pretty quiet guy too. But I think everything together, and that's what it takes, I think, and we were the beneficiaries of it, really, as a wrestling team. We just kind of hung together. We had some wild guys on that team.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll dive in a lot deeper later with your, I would say, obsession with fitness and how that kind of plays out later in life. But I know as someone has been immersed in wrestling, both in high school and now in college, I have a lot of trouble explaining to people how I use that wrestling mentality for everything else in life.
Mm.
And I was wondering if you kind of had the same experience with going through hard situations and constantly um, paralleling it with hard things you faced in wrestling.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's, at least for myself, the working out part was kind of a necessity for me. How I organized my life. I think I didn't wasn't the greatest student, but I knew I was a better student when I would work out. So I just went with what made me a better student, and that was, they kind of coupled each other, and that kind of carries over to anything else. We learn a lot of different things, what works for you. So I think the fitness enthusiast or whatever, I think it's more of a, I don't love to wake up every morning at 5 o'clock and work out either. It's just like everyone's like, I don't enjoy it. Well, I don't either sometimes, but I know I have to. Like, if I want to be the best that day, like if I don't get my workout in right away, it's not going to be the best day. I'll be better if I did. So I drag myself out of bed and strap on the shoes and go at it. And that goes back to like ball apart and the access to it. I came up from a hardworking family, so I was lucky to have mom and parents who really start that going. But learning from Bob and the rest of the guys, the fitness enthusiast, I guess, or whatever, is just the necessity, really, for me, myself, anyhow. Um,
Yeah, looking back, it's kind of crazy that culture from like Bob Hart and someone that was your teammate but a coach to me, Phil Baumberger,
yeah.
to see people like them in there at 5 a.m. every morning was encouraging to me as a high schooler, just trying to look up to anyone that seemed like they had a good idea of what they were doing. So to see people like Phil and Bob going in every morning, I was like, oh, well, they seem like they were good at wrestling, so I guess that's just what I should do.
Yeah.
And then by default kind of got a really good work ethic by going in there and busting my butt with them every morning. Plus, at that time, Bob's, probably mid-50s, scheduled for a hip surgery, still going crazy hard in the wrestling room. So if you see someone like that, I was like, well, surely I can push hard if this guy's pushing hard right now. I think it's
So we have
crazy
him-
the mentality they had.
It's
So
a
we have him to
framework,
thank
yeah.
for your ankle running the marathon.
Yeah.
That's a framework, like you kind of hinting on there. You set yourself up for it. Yeah, you apply what, maybe we can relate back to the wrestling or the workouts or whatever is kind of the grind or whatever you want to think of it as, but you can apply that to anything. It doesn't have to be a workout, or exercise or whatever, making yourself uncomfortable in one way or another, whatever it is, work, you don't want to go to work early, but to get everything done, maybe sometimes you have to. You apply those lessons that you drew from maybe sport or whatever it may be and apply it to anything. I think probably the most important thing you can, if you're going to teach a kid one thing, teach him a work ethic, and he'll be successful. Like you don't
Yeah, you
you
can
don't
apply it
need
to
to be the
anything.
smartest. You
Yeah.
don't need to, like, you can just outwork people and you'll be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So did you carried all that, I'm sure. I mean, seeing you here now, and I know you did, but like you carried that work ethic with you throughout college, and you continued to wrestle there, right?
I did, yeah.
So how did that go? Do you want any highlights there?
Through college, that was a rocky road for me. I think I kind of, after, high school we were on a high coming out of high school. I think we had such a good thing going on in high school with, the community's support and everything there. When I came out of high school, went into college wrestling, and it's kind of borderline. For myself, I felt like my head wasn't in it. I had everything. I was still doing the same stuff. I was going through the motions more or less in like the college. My redshirted my freshman year, went into my sophomore year, and it had some injuries that kind of, a little bit of a hiccup, and kind of going back to the injury thing, and you get that kind of, I was too bullheaded to really take care of them. I just thought, I'd be tough it out, and it didn't work out that way, and then it started kind of, it gets into your head a little bit. And when you're in a college game, you can't have it in your head. So anyhow, it was a rough road, I think, through college. I had a lot of injuries, so my junior or sophomore, junior year was kind of riddled, both of them, by injuries, and just kind of, didn't work out as well as it should have, or no real highlights there.
Do you think you lost maybe some of that camaraderie you had with that high school team? Because you guys have
Absolutely.
been through a lot.
Definitely, yeah. I went from, Slippery Rock we had a good team there too. We went into a team, and like I said, I went with another guy from Juniata, so Gary Price. We were roommates pretty much through, high school. Anytime we went away, we were good friends there. Went on to college. Everything was, good there. Just I think it was a matter of, I needed to kind of step back and really be mindful of what I was doing and why I was doing some things, and I didn't. But beyond that, I don't think, live up to the potential. It was tough. I don't know how to explain it. Really thinking, I analyze it probably every day, and like why and what, and it's easy to look back on things and do them differently, but you can't. I think at the time, I probably would have been better off giving myself a break and stepping back, and really kind of analyzing what I needed to do and what I wanted to do with it.
I think it's crazy how much wrestlers will eat themselves up about like wrestling performances, especially with, you and I come from a sport where there's no professional level in the U.S. There's quote unquote professional wrestling, not at all the same thing. So the highest you can go is like the Olympic level, but you aren't a professional. And there's so many.
You're getting there, man.
Yeah, that for sure getting there.
A lot of sponsorships out there now.
Yeah, fortunately, and like RTCs and places like training clubs at Penn State, that at least they will pay stipends to stay there and train and wrestle out of the club. So definitely working towards it. But I feel like there's a lot of people from where we're from that have these, not horror stories, but still kind of dwell on, me included, on not just college, but even high school wrestling performances. It's crazy to me how I can show up to watch the state tournament and still be so bothered about my high school wrestling performance, even though I'm so many years out of high school. It eats you up like crazy, even though it's like just a high school sport.
It's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of the sport. There's no one to hide behind,
Yeah.
And it's not like, I look back I play baseball too, so like I look back at baseball and like, the third inning, the third baseman made a bad throw too. You can blame somebody else, but you're out on your own on wrestling, and that's kind of the beauty of it. Sometimes you don't have anybody to hide behind. It's there. It is what it is. But I think also wrestlers, you have certain personality traits that kind of lead you to be a wrestler. And I think that's where they beat themselves up looking back. But
I think one important thing you said too is like you didn't really give yourself much of a break in between all this stuff. And as much as we talk about hard work ethic and always being on the go, 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 it's just as important to give yourself a little bit of time to, sit and digest what's really going on. So I think that's an important thing that you threw on there. So you had this college career in wrestling, and then you move on and get your doctorate in physical therapy. How did that go with the schooling and everything? Did you miss the sport? Is there other things you got into, like running or anything like that?
At the time, probably. I mean, you always miss the sport. I don't think you ever really kind of get over the sport. It's always there, I think, once you do it in some capacity. But yeah, I missed it, of course. But I think at the time you're so wrapped in school. I think that's part of like where we go back to like the sport. I was so wrapped up in school and everything else going on. You don't even think about it until you're starting your career, and you're like, oh man, I wish I could go back and do it over again, because all you're thinking about while you're in is being done, getting a job, doing all that phase of life. And then when you're done, you're like, wish I could go back.
So at that point, do you try to replace that with anything?
Yeah, you always. Well, I mean, I do.
Yeah,
I do. I try to learn something new. I don't know, something challenging for myself. That's what it is. You try to do something hard. You end the college career in competition phase. There's always something else you can do as far as competition. Whatever it is. Take up for me, it's trying to learn something different. It might be fly fishing, hunting. That's what I dive into naturally, because I love those things too. And when you're in sport, a lot of times that gets pushed to the back burner. So I've always had an interest in that stuff, and that's where I kind of wrap my head around, the stuff that I missed when I was in sport. And then, school, and you start kind of have to cut down on your hobbies because you have work and everything else going on. But yeah, I mean, coming out of college, I guess back to your original question, what do you replace it with? So for myself, it's a lot of different sports. So you get into, I've done triathlons, and I consider myself an 80%er. So I get like 80% to the part where I feel like I'm starting to get whatever I'm trying to do. I'm getting there, like 80%, and then I jump onto something else, then I just start back over at zero constantly all the time. Whether it's like fly fishing or some archery, shooting a recurve, shooting something else, and then it's like constantly just moving on to something different, and then it's learning to swim distance or whatever it is. Yeah, you always replace it. I feel like with something. For myself, like I have to do something that is hard. I don't know how else to put that.
That's how I am too. I kind of get. It's not that I get bored with things, but you just get to that 80% or something, and then something else just catches your eye.
It becomes less challenging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're not struggling as much.
Mm-hmm.
You miss the struggle.
Yeah,
I
totally
think it's like a disease.
Yeah.
When you're struggling, you hate it. Then when you stop struggling, it's like I got to find it again.
Yeah, it's like some sort of rush. It's weird.
Yeah. I'm there, man. I feel the same way.
That reminds me of Tim Ferriss saying that he feels like he's a constant, like, blue belt in everything that he does, because he's constantly trying to take on different things and know it much better than the average person in the population, but he never masters one of those things. Mm-hmm. He knows it well enough that he can, like, kind of, wean in and out of, like, if he wants to work towards that and be in that group of people, he can, and he can know what's going on, but he never masters that one thing. I feel like I'm kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm, like, flustered if I don't feel like I'm, like, hitting some 10,000 hour mark in, like, one or two areas.
Yeah, we've talked about it before. You have these, like, obsessions that you really, whenever you get on something, you're stuck on it, and you're not going to stop until you reach that end goal that you set originally. For me, it's like I could get 80% of the way there, and then it's just like I find something else that, like, on my way there I find more interesting, or like you said, like more of a struggle. So then you switch over to that, and I just abandon the thought of finishing that first thing, which is a problem because I really need to like commit to stuff and finish it. But I don't know. At the same time, I like to just diversify, I guess.
I feel like I'm even that way with, like, books and podcasts, where something else can catch my eye that I really, really want to, like, say I see, like, Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss put up an episode with a new guest, but I'm like 1 hour in on some other podcast that's like 3 hours long. I'm like, I really want to listen to that podcast more than the one I'm currently listening to. But I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice if I don't finish that podcast out. So I have to force myself to finish that podcast I was on. I'm like, you're a quitter. I don't know what it is. I don't know why I function
So
that
you
way.
won't just switch over to a
Very rarely. I usually make myself finish it out.
You're not an 80%er.
I think I'm a crack.
Glad you said it.
Anyway, fast forward, we're talking about DPT school. Once you actually get your DPT, where do you go from there?
Work, man.
You went to Alaska, right? Like
I
pretty
did.
soon
Yeah.
afterwards.
Well, that was so started work. You know, school loans don't pay themselves, unfortunately. So like you got to figure that out. For myself, anyhow, I had that kind of. I kind of found into a. So I kind of fell into a good situation. I had through wrestling, I had fractured my ankle, so trimalleolar fracture. I was on crutches. I had part of my clinical rotation scheduled to be in Florida, so I couldn't go. So like I needed to drive. I couldn't drive, so I started to scramble, and it was either like find something or I was gonna have to take a year off of school and then start back with the next class. You know, so I scrambled around, and a company had just opened. This is 2008, maybe. This is before there was like physical therapy in Mifflintown. And now there's like 3 clinics or whatever. But they had Central Pennsylvania Rehab Services just opened one. Matt Morgan had opened that. And I walked in one day after just coming out of surgery, actually. I had stopped there, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm in a pinch. I got to have something signed here within the next week saying that I have secured a clinical rotation. I need this many hours. I'll do whatever I need to. Like, my parents are going to have to drop me off at work every day because I can't drive. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. Well, it ends up, Matt Morgan was a great clinician, and I really enjoyed my time there. So I knew through, like wrestling, you surround yourself with good people, you learn good things. So I was like, yeah, this is going to be good. Matt offered me a job, and I was like, right out of college, do I really want to move back into my own town right away? But it seemed like a good situation for me to be mentored, kind of what I wanted to do. So I moved back to Mifflintown right out of DPT school and kind of put there for a year. After a year, it's got the bug to kind of travel a little bit more, and loving the hunt and fish. Alaska was always kind of calling my name. I had done a clinical rotation in Alaska too. So that kind of sparked my interest more in that. I knew I wanted to go back when I left there.
So you just went there based purely off of your interest in hunting and fishing?
Yeah, well, and I had a buddy, actually a pharmacist,
Okay.
Cole Dysinger, who went to Juniata High School, and I played baseball with him after he graduated from Wilkes, and he went to Juneau. He was in Juneau at the time. So he was working for it was a Native American health clinic there, through the government. So he had to be, like, I guess somehow he was in the military, essentially. He went into the military, worked this clinic, and I got to talk to him one day. I'm like, hey, man, can you hook me up? He called me up and said, here's who you need to talk to. They took me as a student, so that's where I went. I spent some time, 3 or 4 months in Juneau. Loved it there, had a great time, knew I wanted to come back, and this was through the winter. So just as I was leaving, it was starting to get nice out.
Were you also at the Native American Health Service? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're at the same site.
Yeah, it's called SEARCH. SEARCH is Southeast Alaska Health Consortium. So It was a government grant. So they had traded, so the Indian tribe had, Native American Tlingit tribe had traded the government land to put health clinics in exchange for healthcare. And that's where that had started.
So what was that like? Because coming out of central Pennsylvania, where there's not really any Native Americans around here, to where you're solely focusing on practicing around that health population, what was that like? Did you have any major takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, you get exposed to a whole new culture, and I've always enjoyed that culture. You read about it, you read about it in book, you learn about it in history class, you learn about it elsewhere, and to really kind of dive in, I think that's what kind of got me hooked on the traveling part, because you get to learn new people, and you start learning about yourself, and it becomes interesting, not only that, and then you start learning, back pain in Pennsylvania is back pain in Alaska, it's back pain. So my time there, it was good. I mean, I had a lot of fun there, just getting involved with that native, I guess, culture and people. They're interesting, very.
Was there any drastically different opinions or perspectives on healthcare, or maybe just life in general, that their population had that really stuck out to you?
Yeah, more of a holistic approach. They were not against medicine, but I would say, reluctant to take a medication. There were very few medications prescribed, outside of, the normal stuff. But it was a different approach, I think, to medicine. And then within the Native American clinics, it was just a different structured healthcare system. It solely, ran through the Native American population at that point in time. Now it no longer does now. So your patients were Native American or Native American beneficiaries in some way. So it wasn't a productivity driven system, where you experience here, like East Coast, you're not, you don't have somebody looking down on how many scripts you wrote or how many units you build. It was purely, you have a patient and you treat them. So it was a holistic approach, and they may see 3 or 4 different providers within the same building at the same time, and then they would all work together. I could walk upstairs and talk to their medical doctor, or they had a bunch of different disciplines kind of in the same house.
Did you like that approach?
I loved it. I loved it. I mean, from a productivity standpoint, that's not great.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, probably not good, not feasible, I guess, in today's system. But yeah, I mean,
So I was putting the patient
I loved
first.
it. I mean, I loved it. Yeah, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
You get to work with a bunch of different disciplines, and everybody has their own little, way that they learned. So you can kind of, if you go with a learning approach of just communication, and you're just picking up little tidbits all the time. You know what it's like with just between the medical field.
Yeah.
The DDO learns a certain way versus a different this, and that's kind of specialized medicine. It's the way we're structured here, in Western medicine, is we're all specialized, and like physical therapist that's even goes to this school may be completely different theory than another one. It's another school, or chiropractic versus physical therapy, or they're doing sometimes the same thing, but they view each other very different sometimes.
Right.
We're against each other because it's all insurance dollar.
Yeah, it seems like that was a much more patient-centered approach than
Mm-hmm.
more like, how
It
many
was great.
procedures can we get done today to meet the quota?
Yeah,
So,
it was a dinosaur at the time, and it's extinct now.
yeah.
Literally, yeah.
Probably a lot smoother triage of care, though, just to have a bunch of different practitioners in the same building or at the same site where you can easily, be in contact with that person instead of, where I'm at now. At least in PA with community pharmacies and the disconnects that can come up with people's doctors, whether it's like MD or DOs, and it's never really one person's fault that you can trace it to, but it's a lot of information can get left out of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
It
seems like it'd be very beneficial for patient-centered care just to have a bunch of practititioners at one site.
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, there was no, I mean, the system we're in now, really technology-wise, I mean, it drives, innovation, like learn more. I think that system kind of maybe wasn't as advanced. We didn't have access to all the same technologies there. It was all based off of government subsidy. So whatever they could get, they got. But it wasn't always accessible there, which is good and bad, I think. Because you learn to do with what you have.
Right.
Do you know much about the outcomes there? How those compare to, say, around here, or is it just anecdotally even like? Did it seem like people got better at the same rates or slower?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to, statistically, no, I don't know. And you're dealing with a whole different culture there too. So you have the cultural bias of a cohort of people that it's just not the same. I don't know. It was fun to work with them. Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your adventures and hunting and stuff that you've done in Alaska while you were out there.
Oh, well, I was working there. But, Alaska is, if you like to hunt and fish, you're in like Disney World. It's like great. It's an awesome place. I love it there. As far as being wild, just there's a lot of wild. Yeah. The fishing, the hunting's as good as it gets, really. So I had a lot of fun.
How far out are you going for these hunts and things like that, or is it pretty close?
A lot of them you can go pretty close. You don't have to go too far.
Okay.
Really, the Juneau, each region's very different. So Alaska's huge. It's like the Midwest splattered and is one state. So you have the whole environmentally, it's very different too. So you have the Southeast, and if they say like Alaska looks like the back of your hand, it's like the Southeast region where I was and spent most of my time was like the thumb part. And it's a bunch of chain of islands, essentially. So the travel in between islands is hard. You're either taking a ferry or you're on a plane. So travel is relatively difficult, but some of the adventure, hiking, biking, whatever you want to do it's top of the line as far as adventure, risk. But it's fun. I don't know where you want to start with that. We might go down a wormhole you don't want to go down.
We encourage wormholes. What kind of hunting was it you were doing then? Like a lot of bear hunting?
Well, back to Juneau, I really wasn't doing any hunting at all when I was in Juneau. I was there for school.
Gotcha.
So I spent my time there 3 months with Cole and Lindsay Dysinger. Moved on from there. So went back to school, graduated in May. Kind of still had that itch. So applied to go back to that same job, but things didn't work out. I started in Mifflintown, worked there for a full year, and then decided I wanted to go back. At that point in time, I started looking into travel PT, so short-term contract work.
And how's that work? You just
It's
sign up with a company and they send you around?
Yeah, it's short-term contracts. Usually it's a hospital that's in need for a provider somewhere, and they put up a need, and they have contracts with these subcontracting companies that have healthcare providers. So in my instance, it was a company that had physical therapy. So they had staffed a lot of these places that needed for physical therapists. And typically it's a short-term contracts. It could be anywhere, the length of time, whatever they really truly need. So if somebody goes on maternity leave, whatever it is, most typically it's like 13 weeks. I got hooked up with this company. The company gets the contract with the hospital, and then that company contracts me to be there for a certain amount of time. So that's what I did. Then the first place I got placed was Sitka, Alaska.
Nice.
Which is about 90 miles south of Juneau.
So did you get to choose that, or they threw you there?
Kind of. You always get to choose. You have a say. It's not like they're like, yeah, you're going here.
Right. Okay.
You sign a contract. You interview. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of the middleman.
Okay.
They set it up. They have these contracts with the hospitals. Not necessarily a contract for monetary, but it's just like a contract that they can provide providers, and the hospital may have, or whatever clinic, whatever it is, they may have multiple different companies that they talk to. So my company was in contract, or whatever you want to call it, with Sitka, Alaska, who needed a provider at that point in time. They set me up with an interview. I interviewed over the phone. They're like, hey, when can you be here? So 2 weeks. Then they fly you up and you start work. So you're there for 13 weeks or whatever the length of time your contract runs.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
It's a cool gig. I loved it.
Yeah.
You're...
So where is that exactly?
Sitka, 90 miles south of Juneau. So it's still in that that thumb region. Okay. Yeah, just farther south down there. Another island. Yeah, so smaller, actually, in terms of city size. There's 7,000 to 9,000 people, depending on what time of year you're there. And I loved it there. It's just a small community. It's like taking Mifflintown and Port Royal and placing them on a small island, in Gulf of Alaska.
So how do you get into that island? Is there an airport, or you can...
Yeah, commercial airline. So Alaska Airlines flies right into Sitka.
Because I've heard of places in Alaska, I don't know, like the cities too well, but I've heard there's places where you can literally only get there by a boat or something like that. You can't,
Yeah,
you can't fly in, you can't drive in,
bush
anything
plane or
like.
boat. There's a
Yeah,
lot of places like that.
nice.
So I went to Sitka, and that one has a commercial airline that
Okay.
flies into it and out of it. So it's a pretty big tourist town. A lot of those places they thrive off of tourism, especially in Southeast with cruise ships and all that. So there's the commercial airlines fly there pretty regular through summer months, or they really fly all year round. But you have a lot of flights coming in the summer months because the population is much higher because of tourism.
What's like the normal weather then in the summer months when the tourism is highest? Is it still like, I mean, obviously everyone around here just associates Alaska with freezing, but how cold is it compared
It's not cold. The temperature changes. It's actually milder than it is here.
Really?
I lived there for, well, we'll get there, like down the road in the story, but I'd lived there for example, I was there straight for 3 years. 3.5 years, and I had seen maybe like 3 snowstorms that actually laid on the concrete and then stayed. So the one stayed for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, and then it was gone. But the mountains there, you look up and you're looking at 2,200 feet. You have snow that stays through July. So down in the town, you may be at 70 degrees and you're looking at snow.
And how was that daylight like? So I know there's like 20 hours of daylight people will say sometimes in certain parts of Alaska. Did you adjust to that pretty easily? Or?
Short days, we had this short days, long nights, and vice versa, depending on the season. It didn't really bother me that much. The winters got long, it didn't seem like there was much of a fall or a spring. It was kind of like you went from your summer months straight into a winter, and the winters would be chillier. It was never really like cold. But that would last like clean into like May, and it was just a long time to where it starts getting dark and kind of dreary, and there's a lot of depression and all that. But it's rainy weather, so Sitka and Southeast in general, it's a temperate rainforest, so there's a lot of rain there. It's kind of gray. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just gray a lot, and then you might go 2 weeks where not really seeing sunshine, and then sun will shine and it might be another 2 weeks.
Jeez.
Depending.
I can't imagine, man. So living in Pittsburgh, it seems like it's gray all the time, which it pretty much is, but we at least get the sun, like, every now and then. But compared to you guys barely even getting the sun, it's dark all the time.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like that would take a toll on my...
You learn to get out in it. It's like around here, you're like, oh, it's raining, I'm not going outside today. Like there, you're just like, you just go. You just learn to go. It's a different mindset. You kind of get used to it. I know my wife didn't like, she didn't like it as much.
Did you meet her in Alaska?
No, I met her back here. So I guess go back to this whole, we'll bring this back full circle, I guess. So I took that travel job in Sitka. Did my 4 or 5 months there. I wanted to go home for the fall. So like my contract's up and you're basically free, at that point in time. Told my travel company like, hey, I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm heading back home. I wanted to hunt basically in Pennsylvania through the fall. That's really why I wanted to come back and stay through Christmas. So came back home. Actually ended up, cousin and I are about the same age. We bought a house in Harrisburg and I needed something to be called like my home base. So I worked in Harrisburg for about 6 months, kind of set up a home. And that's where, at that point in time, I kind of had met my wife there. After meeting her in the hospital, I continued to travel. So I went to Wyoming, spent some time there, and then came back, worked at the hospital a little bit more, and then ended up getting a job in Hawaii. So I went there for a couple months.
And you're dragging her along this whole time, too?
No.
Oh.
We were dating.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. After the Wyoming trip, actually, she was like this coming and going every 3 months. Like there's not much of a relationship. So we got a little more, more serious. And I think it was after like a year or so of me doing that, I went back to Sitka. So they had called me back up and they're like, hey, will you come up full time? I'm like, oh, man. So through kind of wheeling a deal, and I ended up, getting her a job offer as well. And they offered her the job, and then I kind of talked it over with her, and she's like, yeah, sure, let's go. I was like, great, so we moved up. We went up for really a year was the plan. We ended up staying a little over 3. So yeah, and that was kind of the travel thing. After that, after 3 years there, um, she wanted to move back closer to home. She was in school to be a nurse practitioner at that point in time and was coming up on clinical. And we had like the options there are pretty small, as far as like a doctor to kind of shadow, and you're not going to get a whole lot of exposure to a lot of stuff. So we had more connections in central Pennsylvania. So we moved back this way to get her a little more exposure to different settings, different doctors, and finished up school here. We're still here.
Yeah.
So how many years total have you been practicing then as a DPT?
Probably 9.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I guess that gives us a pretty good segue with, nearly a decade of practice. Is there anything that comes to your mind, we'll say, semi-preventative care, if you want to tailor it to like a normal musculoskeletal injury, go ahead. So maybe an example that I would think of is, that I would ask a PT is like, is hanging on bars, like hanging from a pull-up bar at night, like, is that actually good for my spine? Like, is that a good thing to do?
I mean,
like, is there good things like that you don't think the normal population thinks about, that you can kind of do to help your body out?
If I had to simplify it, man, it's just eat right, get some activity. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, and don't do a sitting job.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
That's
but I
fair.
am going to make you work for it and go a step deeper. What things are you doing then? And if you do want to start going into fitness
I do a lot
here,
of the wrong things, man.
However you want to segue it, what would your the perfect Tyler Gilson be doing for his body?
Man. So this is a wormhole.
We could break them down in segments. Right?
No, we got as long as you want, dude.
We could break it down and just start with the eat right. Like, what do you do there? And then
eat right. Okay. Well, I think that's variable too. I go flexible on that, right? So I think make it simple. If it grows in the ground, and runs on the ground, eat it. As close as we can get to nature, the better, right? The less we process it, the better.
Mm-hmm. You were telling me one of the last times we were wrestling together that you had toyed around with Keto Diet for a while. And Nick and I actually right now are toying around pretty heavily with the ketogenic diet.
Ketogenic diet. Yeah, I've toyed with all of them. I feel like at some point, don't know what you feel or what. I really don't think there's one good diet for everyone. There's really not. I think it's you learn what makes you feel good. And if you're honest with yourself, usually that's a pretty clean diet. I don't know that anybody can honestly look at themselves and say, I feel great on processed stuff.
Yeah, right.
I eat Cheetos and I feel great. No, you probably don't.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I've done all these and you find stuff that works best for you. And I think you feel better. And if you're, mindful to how your brain's working and how your body feels and how you feel while you're doing stuff, you can find your own diet. I've done the ketogenic diet, a Paleolithic diet. I've done intermittent fasting. I've done all these, and I see benefit with all of them. I see different changes in my body with each one of them, very differently, And I think when I came up through wrestling, that was when, it was don't eat any fat. Don't, there was so many things that were bad. If it had fat in it, it was bad. So you ate fat-free cheese, you ate fat-free mayonnaise, you ate whole wheat bread, and that's what you ate all the time. And now it's a different story. I think if you understand, I think for myself it was dabbling with each one of these diets, and then really looking into what's going metabolically and what's happening with each one of these diets and why they say, what's the goal of this diet? Ketogenic diet is to get yourself into ketosis. Are you in ketosis? Are you truly in ketosis? Do you feel good on that? And what happens to your body? I think you can train your body to eat differently, and I think there's so many different bias to what you can or what you want to believe. Sometimes it becomes a fad, like, oh, I'm on Paleolithic, and then it was ketogenic, and then it was, there's always another one coming down the road somewhere, at some point, what are you trying to get out of the ketogenic,
So I'm kind of like you. I like trying all these different diets and seeing what works best for me. I think that's a great tip because, like you said, one diet's not going to work for everyone, and everyone has their own, whether they're just their own personal belief system where they don't eat meat, or they don't want to eat something that's processed or whatever, or just trying out these different diets to figure out what works best for you based on your own personal like thoughts and beliefs is awesome. Because so I started out with the intermittent fasting last year. I did that for a little while. I gave myself like a 6-hour window, and I just found that I was, you're supposed to feel better on it, and I was feeling worse because if you look at me, I'm not a big guy. I don't have a ton of like excess weight to lose, and I was losing weight on that diet. I couldn't bring in enough food throughout the day. Just my stomach wasn't big enough during that 6-hour window to really fill myself with carbs or with calories, excuse me. But so then I switched over to the ketogenic diet this year, and that so far, like, I feel really good on it. I've only been in it maybe like 6 or 7 weeks so far, but it feels great. But it's not going to be my end. Like, I'm not just stopping and I'm done with this. I'm going to keep trying other things, because with all these fad diets coming, I feel like there's no problem with trying them out as they come. Yeah. Because if it works for you and you want to stay on that fad diet, and there's all this research that's probably coming with it. Like every time there's a new fad diet, there's so many research studies that come out and show the benefits and the negatives of it. Yeah, exactly. So if you can fit that into your life and fit that into your own, belief system, I feel like, as long as you can find a diet that's right for you, there's no real issue with it. Unless you're eating something that's proven to be complete garbage for your body. But there's some cool things where people do these like elimination diets where they'll drop out all these foods and slowly introduce them back in and see what is.
I think that's probably if you're looking at the foundation behind any of these, that's probably is what you're taking out, not so much what you're putting in.
Right.
It's not what you're taking in, it's what you're probably not taking in. Like with ketogenic diet, you're eliminating a lot of carbohydrate. So, a lot of our carbohydrates today we consider, they're highly processed foods. Unless you're talking about fruits and vegetables, where don't carry a high density of carbohydrate to begin with, unless certain fruits. But in general, I think those things are really what you're taking out is probably giving you the benefit more so than what you're taking in. And I think it sometimes gets turned around backwards.
Yeah,
but that's just my opinion. It's
well, and as you slowly introduce things back in, you can kind of tell what's making you feel like crap and what's like, what you can reasonably eat that makes you feel good. So,
I think I just read an interesting book, and I can't even think of what the name of it was. But the theory behind the book was basically taking you back to your origins of culture, and it was based off of, getting your genetics tested, and then your genetics led you to your, where are you from? Like, what origin are you from? And then what the diet of that where you came from, Oh,
that's smart.
And there's doctors like practicing that, they start prescribing these foods that, we as humans haven't evolved. The basis behind this was we haven't evolved as humans as fast as we have evolved the food. So the wheats now have evolved much faster than what the wheats were back wherever they may be from. So the wheat back then was much different than the wheat now, or whatever it may be. So if you come from a culture that was, living off a lot of berries or hunter-gatherer type culture, you're probably going to respond well to a hunter-gatherer type diet or Paleolithic, or that type of thing. It's pretty interesting. It was a pretty cool book.
Yeah, that does seem like a really rational approach. But either way, I feel like one of the big themes that you touched on that I think is important to reiterate for everyone is that any diet that's, say, it doesn't, whether it's time-restricted feeding or it's vegan or vegetarian or keto, if it's eliminating the processed foods that are rampant in the standard American diet and the very, very high sugar in the standard American diet and caloric excess to a pretty ridiculous degree for some people. If you move away from that, it doesn't matter as much where you fall, whether it's ketogenic or a vegetarian diet, as long as you're moving away from that standard American diet.
I feel like it comes back to the work ethic thing we were talking about, because a lot of these diets aren't easy to keep up with. Like, at least with keto, anyways, it seems like I'll have like these carb cravings, and I'll see something and I'll want to eat it so bad, but you just got to tell yourself you can't. Like, I don't think I could have done this diet 4 years ago before I developed the same like work ethic that I have now in medical school, because I just feel like I wouldn't have been mentally strong enough to keep myself from eating like those chips or eating that piece of pie or something like that. But now, like, having built on that work ethic that I have, I feel like that goes kind of hand in hand with like the ability to control those impulses. I don't know what you guys think about that, but
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You struggle. You try to deprive yourself of something that helps you. You learn. I don't
yeah,
know. You learn a little bit about yourself. You learn about what a little bit more, and each time you learn a little bit more.
yeah, your whole life's an experiment, so why not keep
Yeah,
testing
you
what's
got
what's
to.
good for you?
I truly believe in that. You gotta test whatever works for you, and deep down you'll find it. What what you feel good, or whatever diet, if you wouldn't even call it a diet. At a point, I don't like even the word diet. It becomes a lifestyle. Really, you change how you live. If that's what makes you feel good, that's what you do, and you got to change how you live to feel good or function optimally.
Yeah,
I agree. I think I overcompensate, at least in the eyes of some other people, with how much I go into the experimentation of it. So, like, for example, since I started with the ketogenic diet, I have recently bought blood glucose and blood ketone monitor from I think it's called Precision Extra by Abbott. So that way I can like monitor whenever I want, just lance and then monitor my. Actually, I just have blood ketone strips right now since uh, it doesn't seem like the blood glucose fluctuates as much. So we are measuring our
Urine?
well, he has the
I have the
ketone
urine strips. That's what I started with.
I have like the blood monitor to like check your blood ketones. But
Are they
I don't
accurate?
want to.
How are they pretty accurate?
So I feel like the urine strips are really accurate, at least as far as matching it to my own feelings, like my energy and mental state. Because whenever I started with the keto diet, I was checking my ketones in urine pretty much every day. And it was slowly coming up. Like, as I started, I was slowly making ketones and just peeing them out. And then, like, I'm getting into ketosis, but I'm not really using those ketones yet. My body's like, what are these? Dump them out.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm peeing them out all the time. And then I get to this point where I'm like, I'm really thinking like, I should be fully in ketosis. I should be using these, but I don't really feel those effects everyone's saying. And I was like so close to giving up on the keto diet. And then like 2 days later, I really started feeling like I didn't need nearly as much sleep. I didn't need, as much time to sit there and focus on the same topics to try and learn. And I'm checking my ketones, and they're slowly coming down now on like the test strips. So I was reading about it, and it seems like my body's starting to adapt to using them. So I'm not just peeing them away. I'm starting to use them. So I don't know. That's pretty interesting, and I think that feels pretty accurate to me. I follow this Peter Attia on. He's like a podcaster and a physician and everything. Yeah, The Drive. So I follow him on Instagram and stuff, and he'll post all these comparisons basically of the different things he's using to measure his ketosis, and one of them's like a breath analyzer, which is supposed to measure ketosis. One of them's the blood thing, and I think he also does like the urine strips and maybe one other thing. And he's trying to find like how accurate these things are, and I've seen a few posts where he's questioning the accuracy of them, but I think it's really hard to take away from the fact that I was feeling different when I started seeing these come down. But then, like,
have you tried? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so Cole brought his little ketone blood meter thing, and I tested it today. And disappointingly, I only saw 0.2 as my value, which is like pretty low. They say you're fully in ketosis at about 1. So I don't know what's going on there.
Have you tested that against your urine strip?
So whenever I just tested my urine strip, it said I was at a trace amount of ketones in my urine. So
it gives like a trace.
Yeah, it's like 15 milligrams per deciliter or something.
Have you tried exogenous?
I have, yeah. I would mix them up into like a drink, and I would just stir it up and drink that.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I do actually. I like those a lot. I didn't try the pill form. Cole has, I think.
Have you tried it with your test strips though, and like see
you can see it go up.
rise?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I messed around with it for a while. The same thing, kind of felt like garbage for like, I mean, it was like a month.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, boo, I was like, my brain was on fire. Like I just
I
felt
know,
great.
that's where I'm at now.
You know, but I lost a lot of weight. Like it was
Mhm.
hard for me to like keep weight on, and it was difficult to maintain that diet for me. You know,
Yeah.
like easy in a sense that like I don't eat a whole lot of carbohydrate to begin with, but then in the sense of like when I could like things that would bump me out and when I was eating, and you know, just having to trying to fit feeding into work or you know vice versa, the type of food and having that prepared so that I'm not, you know, that got kind of difficult for me. But that was one of probably the diets that I felt the best on.
Yeah.
You know, once you get into that phase.
Exactly.
once
You
get
feel
there.
like garbage until that point. But so I was playing around with it for a while, and at first I was losing a lot of weight because I wasn't able to keep my calorie intake as nearly as high because I'm used to, you know, just stuffing my face with chips or something like that. But I have this cool app on my phone called Chronometer, and I log my food on it. So it's very tedious to log like everything I eat, but it shows me where my calories are at, and then it shows me the percent of like how much is fat,
Yeah.
how much is protein, how much is carbs. So I always try and keep my carbs under 5%, and then I'll try and get my fat at least to 70. But it is tedious, but it's cool because you can see over a long term, you can track your graph of how much like fat intake you have versus carbs, and then I can see at the end of the day, am I matching the calorie intake that I'm burning so that I can try and keep my weight at a stable level.
Yeah.
I noticed for me, I haven't had trouble keeping my carb intake to like a sub 5 to 10% threshold, but my biggest problem is that there was a lot of days where my protein and fat were close to like a 1-to-1 ratio instead of like a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 fat to protein ratio.
Yeah.
Mainly because the things I were buying were like non-carb protein bars or very low-carb protein bars or a lot of meats, like a
It's
lot
difficult
yeah.
because a lot of if it's just hard to get foods that have the fat. Yeah. I mean, the protein would bump me out.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
you know,
Yeah, it's a lot of cheese, a lot of mayonnaise.
A lot of avocado.
A lot of
That's been
avocado.
my savior recently. It was just like plowing through avocados.
The one thing I found though, there's like certain types of avocados that I'd scan with that app I use, and you can scan like barcodes and certain brands or whatever. They would have like 10 times the amount of carbs as a different avocado. Like the black skin ones are really low carb, but then the green ones, for whatever reason, have
The green ones, the Hass ones or Haas ones.
however you say it, Hass or Haas, they're better for carb load. So like there's less carbs in those ones.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
that's
gotcha.
confusing. But yeah, there's less carbs in those Hass ones than like I don't know, whatever, maybe California grown, the green ones, the big green ones.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyways, that's a good idea. Like stuff your face with avocados, lots of cheese. I eat a lot of fish right now and a lot of butter on everything.
Yeah, I also got MCT oil. I'm blanking on what brand I'm using. I was using Onnit before, and then I found like a little bit of a cheaper one. I think it's called like Brain Octane or something like that. It might be messing up the brand. So when I make salads with like, you know, avocado, spinach, salmon, whatever, I'll just drench it in either. If I'm not using the MCT oil, I'll use like olive oil and just
that's your stomach
douse
take
it.
that.
Pretty well, surprisingly. I would think it'd be a lot more.
Man, I hate MCT
I was gonna say
oil.
that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be dangerous. Your first
Yeah.
first couple times you put too much MCT oil in there.
To be fair, I guess I was tapered up on MCT oil for a while because in my coffee in the morning,
Do it with like a bulletproof coffee.
right, well, kind of. I was well, maybe. I guess I don't know what the qualification is for bulletproof
Ghee
coffee.
butter, MCT oil.
I just
coffee.
bought like
That's
Onnit's MCT oil because it's like a vanilla creamer essentially. I just add that to my coffee every morning. So I guess I was already used to consuming a decent amount of MCT oil.
One thing that I think tastes a heck of a lot better than that is making like coffee and pouring a ton of heavy whipping cream into it. You get like 50 calories or so per just like tablespoon. So you can fill like half of your cup with heavy whipping cream, and it just tastes like you just put a lot of creamer in your cup.
I gotta stay away from dairy sometimes too.
Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword there. I could lean one way or the other.
Are you lactose intolerant, or you just don't think you respond?
I just too much of it doesn't settle well.
A lot of people
I
get
just don't-
that,
It's
like-
not like I get sick. It's just I
Yeah.
don't feel good. I just feel sluggish and like what,
I think that happens to a lot of people. There was a study I was reading where like a lot of people throughout, as you're getting older, you like get more of an intolerance towards lactate. Yeah, I guess you start losing that enzyme possibly as a mechanism. I don't know, but
There is a lot of days in some previous summers where I would be bulking and I would buy a half gallon of milk every day and drink a half gallon of milk daily. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew I was getting a lot of protein.
Too many magazines probably from Willis. Huh?
Yeah, a little too much Willis talk taking to heart. Yeah, I was plowing through milk for, I would say probably like not this previous summer, but the 2 summers previous to that. But anyway, one last thing that you brought up that I wanted to talk about before we moved on from the food segment. You brought up Peter Attia in passing, which I guess you listened to as well on the drive. And before I started this keto diet, I wanted to, this goes back to the desire to experiment, I guess. I subscribed to his podcast just so I could see the show notes for a list of all the labs that he ordered before he does like extended ketogenic diets and fasts. And kind of as a side note, I have a good enough relationship with my PCP that I emailed her a Word doc with like 75 to 80 labs that I wanted ordered, and she pretty much just placed a standing order at a hospital near me at school, so that way I can just go whenever and get these labs monitored. So I got my baselines before I started.
Got good insurance.
Yeah. Well, they're all covered, so thanks
Were
insurance. They? Yeah, it's nice to see.
Must be good.
Yeah,
nice to see insurance doing its job once in a while. It's a good feeling.
Well, you were also talking about, I think you got it from Peter Attia again, those like implantable glucometers that you were talking about.
the Dexcom
so crazy.
watches. Yeah. Yeah, I have a problem.
Yeah, you
What
do.
is that, intravenous?
No, it's sub-Q, but it still like gives you real-time feedback of at least I think it's sub-Q.
How's it reading it?
I don't know the exact
to be blood.
mechanism, but I mean, you do have like capillaries in like your subcutaneous layer. That's what I would think it's measuring. Maybe I'm wrong in that. But yeah, the brand is called Dexcom watches, and they're covered by insurance if you're a type 1 or type 2 diabetic, especially type 1. But when your physician prescribes it, they need to send that diagnosis code. So of course, if I would have asked for that, I would maybe be able to convince my PCP to prescribe that for me, which wouldn't be the problem. The problem would be I don't have type 1 or type 2 diabetes.
Yeah, you don't want that on your record.
Yeah.
I looked up the
abuse in the health system.
5 years from now.
Yeah. I looked up the out-of-pocket price for it, and it averages like $9 a day to use that watch if you don't have insurance coverage.
But I thought that was crazy that you wanted to do this when you're not even diabetic. Like, why are you measuring?
Back to the beginning. If it feels good, man, do the diet. Care what your ketone level is.
I enjoy the just being a walking experiment.
You can learn. That's the best way I learn. Like doing this stuff. I learn something about each one of them, and really more about the metabolism. What am I metabolizing? Why? And what do I feel? And how am I doing it? And those types of things what I get interested in. Yeah.
All right, you want to move to your second? So you said activity.
What's the next? The activity.
Said,
just mix it up.
Yeah,
mix it up. I mean, I think probably the number one thing that I see in the clinic is repetitive stress injuries. A lot of times with musculoskeletal system is repetitive stress. Whether that be sitting, repetitive stress. Somebody that sits for a desk job is like the number one risk factor for back pain. You just have a sitting occupation. It's just repetitive stress to a certain area of the body. And I think that goes back to the exercise. Just if you're doing the same thing all the time, whether it's, swimming, you see all kinds of problems with swimmers that just swim all the time, or too much volume or not doing it correctly. There needs to be a balance there somewhere. So swim, run, bike, do whatever. And I think, I have a tendency to kind of like become hyper-focused on one thing, and do a lot of it. Or I think a lot of people do.
Yeah.
You get good at one thing and you want to do that all the time. And then you end up with an injury, And I think it's through trial and error of doing all the wrong things that I've come to the point now where you can only do the wrong things for so long, and then you end up with an injury, and then you got to figure out what else I can do. And I think to this point, I think that's mix it up, whatever you're doing, do something, whatever that is, do something, and then don't do the same thing all the time.
Just out of curiosity, what's your current fitness regimen look like? If you kind of just break it down like a roughly weekly basis.
Weekly basis. All right. So I'm like a 3 days on, active rest day, 2 days on, 1 day I call like I try to take like an off day where I'm not doing, and it's more of like an active recovery day. An active recovery day may be hiking, cutting wood, something like that, where I'm not like focused on a particular workout. It could be anything on those days. 3 days on, those 3 days on, I usually try to mix it up in variables, some type of resistance training in there, whether that be for strength gain, some type of metabolic conditioning on 1 day, and then something that involves some type of power movement, fast, and trying to push those metabolic thresholds of each one of those systems somewhere along those lines. And then it depends on what I'm training for, so if, I try to, last year was a triathlon, so I wanted to do a half Ironman.
What are the distance breakdowns on that? Half marathon's like the 13-1. And then
I think the bike's over a century ride, right?
Yeah,
for a
so
normal,
it's like 60 something, maybe 70 miles. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you, to be honest. Total distance 100 and something.
Something like 1.2 mile swim, maybe something around there.
It's 1.2. Yeah, I couldn't even tell you at this point. I don't get wrapped up in that type of stuff. It's just like, well, here I got a bike. Here I go. I'm gonna go across the finish line, then I'm gonna, and then after that I'm gonna run. So I might as well not worry about how far I'm running. At least that's my mindset. But so like last year, that's what it was. I'd never done running, biking, or swimming really, so it was kind of a learning experience. I had dabbled in some of them, but not to those distances or that mark.
What was the trickiest of the three to
learning to swim? I think like the learning to breathe while you're swimming for a distance. It was a cold water swim too, open water, so like that was kind of tricky. So I spent more time on that, biasing that. I had, run before, and I've obviously, done biking before, but I didn't worry about those as much as it took me probably 3 or 4 months to really feel confident in the water.
So how'd you go about the swimming? Because I'm trying to pick that up myself, but I kind of I know how to swim, but I don't know how to do it right with the, the speed for a triathlon or any sort of swimming competition. Do you just watch YouTube videos on technique, or do you have somebody like coaching you, or what did you do there?
Yeah. Well, I read a lot, so there's good books out there. Brian McKenzie has a good one. It's Power, Speed, Endurance, and that kind of breaks down his training philosophies on each one of them, breaks down technique on each one of them. So like you read through that and you kind of get that wrapped around your head.
Is that the dude that does like pole training with dumbbells and stuff?
Yeah, Laird Hamilton.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other guys, but he and Laird Hamilton kind of really, I guess, were ones that brought it in the spotlight of that.
Yeah. Have you done any of that?
Pool training?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Me either. Dang.
Find a pool and we use, we'll do it. Tuscarora Creek, maybe.
Yeah, there we go. Right out back.
I don't know if it's deep enough.
Nah, not out there.
Maybe a little dirty. We'll lose her dumbbells in there.
Yeah, so I'd read about it, and obviously like we're getting some kind of like a baseline foundation of knowledge of like what in your head you can think about what you need to do. The main thing is, man, you just jump in, try not to drown.
Yeah, right.
You learn pretty. You just do it. You keep doing it wrong, and then read about it and try to do it right. That was, the main big thing with Brian McKenzie's theory was, instead of getting away from this whole volume mentality, like endurance running there for the longest time was just all about volume. Just go run, and then just put on miles and. Log a bunch of miles, and that's how it was. You never really like trained or drilled, and that's another thing, like going back to what we talked about earlier, like what can you take away from wrestling? I approach a lot of things just like I would a wrestling like practice. You kind of warm up for it, and then you start drilling, and you're hitting phases of what you want to do. So single leg, whatever, what it is, you got to set it up first. Then you hit the step, step 1, 2, 3. You break it into steps, and then you put the things together. Same thing. You can probably approach any of that. It's how we learn to do whatever, our jobs. Break it out. Kind of warm up to it. Break it down a little bit in this, manageable steps. Put it all together, and then do it. And that was kind of his theory of you drill in form, form over volume, and that worked for me. Sooner or later you kind of get it, and then you add some volume in there, so you're confident that you can swim a mile in a quarter. But that was kind of that was last year, and then once that was over, I haven't been back in the pool since. Haven't been back in it. Next year I wanted to do this backcountry hunt, and I knew that it was a pretty big endurance type event.
And you just got back from one recently, right?
Yeah, Wyoming. So another endurance type event. It's training. It's pretty brutal. You have to have a lot of things planned out.
Yeah.
You're going to be hiking back in 7 miles, and it doesn't sound like a lot of distance, but you're gaining, 4,000 or 5,000 feet sometimes. That's exaggeration there.
Plus the gear you're carrying.
Yeah, you got 60 pounds on your back sometimes, and just to slap 60 pounds on you and walk, that it's a different type of workout, so preparing for that, and then just kind of, preparing for the hunt in itself, what you're going to eat, everything you got to eat, you got to carry on your back. So that's just more weight you got to carry up there. So then you start trickling, taking things away, and then back to the diet aspect of it. And what am I going to need? Well, this Snickers bars might taste good, but it's not going to give me a whole lot while I'm back there, so I better go with this or that. And hydration's another thing, kind of tweaking hydration levels and where I can get water.
Do you bring water filters with you?
Oh, yeah. We just used, I had a gravity filter, my buddy had a pump filter from the creek, and then you do a lot of studying on maps, where's the water source? For us, it was about a 3-mile round trip, at least a 3-mile round trip, which was half a day sometimes till you get from camp down to water source, pump the water, get back up to camp, so take into account all those things, and then you're putting on a lot of miles, and it's heavy miles, with packs on your back, and it was just a different type of endurance event, so I trained for that for a better part of a year, doing my regular workouts, but kind of catering them towards that type of event.
Did you get any mule deer while you were out there?
I did, yeah. We got 2 out of the 3 got.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So,
what's the next one then that you're looking into?
I don't know. I've been thinking about that. I'm not sure yet. Definitely another hunt next year, and that was fun. So I'll probably do that again. I might do another triathlon or half Ironman. I'd love to do a full mile Ironman, but it's time consuming. The workouts are so long. I would have to change something up if I was going to put that much time into really getting, the ability to, I think, do a full, because it's no joke.
Yeah. Man, those hunts sound really fun. I don't hunt myself, but just being out there in the wilderness for that long just sounds awesome to me.
It is, and that could deprivation. You talk about deprivation. You get into those hunts and you're depriving yourself of a warm bed. A lot of times, a couple nights you start shivering yourself through the night. 3 or 4 nights, and you start really questioning why the heck you're there, and it becomes a grind. But that's part of it. And then, all that water, you're thirsty as heck, but
you're surviving.
I only got 2 liters for the next 2 days. I got to figure this out, and I want to boil dinner, those types of things, trying to eat at a mountain house, or trying to find something that's easy to pack in, and then what you're going to eat, and you're hungry, and you can't have all these snacks, the deprivation part of that, you start appreciating, hey, when you get back home, you look at things different. I can jump into bed tonight. It's warm, and I can, if the heat, if I'm cold, I can turn the heat up. If I need a light, simple stuff. I flip on a light. Holy cow! That part of it I like the most.
So what'd you do as far as technology goes? Did you take your phones with you, and if so, how'd you charge that and stuff? When
I had a solar.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so a Goal Zero.
Yeah,
and they're pretty slick now. Technology now makes it a lot easier. One of the guys that went with us, he used to do it back in the day, and those guys were tough.
Yeah.
I mean, they were the real deal. They did it with no electronics, no way to call. You just went in, and the gear that they had was, they're like Woolrich stuff, trying to hike.
Not lightweight at all.
No, I mean, it wasn't lightweight. You're back in there in your survival mode. Now it's a little different. We have pretty good gear. Technology-wise, I had your phone. You try to recharge that with the sun. And you use as little as you need. And then I had this InReach Explorer. We took one of those along just in case we needed it, and it helps with if you need to hit that SOS button.
Yeah.
How many days again did you say you were out there?
It was 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. We were back in really for, let me think, the last 3. So it was 14 days, like 11 days.
Yeah, but you're out there long enough you get to appreciate that contrast of being out there full survival mode and then getting back into warmth.
There was a lot of times where I was pretty, you questioning why you're still in there.
What that reminds me of is my friend Andrew and I did a kayak trip recently. So right after I hurt my ankle, so that was like thing number one that went wrong, and I'm there on crutches. I can't really make camp very efficiently, and we got thunderstorm going very, very hard the first night. Pretty much right as soon as we got off the water, all of our stuff got soaked. Nothing was untouched, and we pretty much didn't sleep that night because we were freezing, and we did not plan accordingly to have everything kind of wrapped up tight to not get everything wet. And we woke up the next morning, and we were like, this doesn't make sense to do. We just pulled an all-nighter. We have maybe 50 plus miles on the river to go in a very, very still river. It was like pretty much nonstop paddling, and all of our stuff was wet, and we called his dad to come get us.
No,
and
he didn't.
We called him to come get us, and he said, okay, in a couple hours I'm going to leave. And we were like, okay, we packed our stuff up. We got on the river. We were on the river for maybe like 15 minutes, and Andrew was like, do you think we could still do this? And I was like, I mean, at this point, we're so mad. And I was like, maybe if we start like cycling stuff, just like putting it on our kayak to dry and kind of like cycling through, it's like, maybe we could get this to work. And we're like, all right, let's start cycling stuff through for the next hour, see how it goes. And of course, eventually we decided to call off the support, and we finished out. Got hit by another thunderstorm, and that night, but we were way more prepared, and of course more obstacles came up. Got a pretty bad GI illness also on the third day of that trip. But yeah, it's crazy. Then you finally get back into the dry and the warmth and the free use of technology and
I think
food.
everybody should do it, right? You become soft living with it.
So I don't
convenient.
Hunt as much as you do now, mainly because of school, but I come from a pretty big hunting family, especially like my step family. Actually, side note, fortunately, first Monday of whitetail got bumped back to like the Saturday after Thanksgiving now, so I can finally hunt again. It'll be the first time since I've been in college. But I think my favorite thing about hunting is that you get to interject yourself into the food chain, and that's a side of, food that most people don't see, and I think that's why some people have a problem with hunting because they see it as, well, there's already food in the supermarket, so you're going out of your way to, like, unnecessarily kill an animal, which, beyond the fact that overlooks how supply and demand works, because if, everyone's hunting, they aren't going to keep providing all that food in the supermarket. Just the fact of being able to appreciate your food and to be the hunter that got it. And it's, I'm sure you can speak to this maybe a little more eloquently than I am, but it seems as if it's not that you enjoy killing the animal inherently. It's kind of a sad thing to do, but it's also like the most raw way and the most natural way to get your food. It's not coming from factory farms. It's not coming from, big farm agriculture that's like just destroying. I'm not talking about small town farms here, but like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres just like mowed over for farming and stuff like that. But instead, it's you going out and getting your food. I feel like it's such like an almost intimate experience with nature that I wish everyone could kind of experience?
That's how we all started. I think we all have it in us at some point, in some way. We just get so distant from it, that if we weren't hunter gatherers at some point, we wouldn't be here today, or our ancestors weren't hunter gatherers, So I think it's innately inside of us at some point, and I think that's for me personally. There's different reasons why people hunt. Some it's more of a game. Some for me personally, I like to eat it. That's I don't buy meat from the grocery store. Haven't for probably a lot of years. My wife and I may eat a handful of meals that are store-bought meats, and that's like chicken or, steak every now and then if we want beef, but maybe a handful. It's either, wild-caught fish, venison, what we have local to where we're living at the point in time. To me, it is that connection back to the food chain. I enjoy that. That animal is not a trophy to me. I like to think of it as, I honor it, and maybe I do have the horns or a picture or something like that, but it's more to honor the animal than it is for me to be like, hey, look at us, that. That's why I personally do it, and not knocking anybody that does trophy hunter or anything like that. It's just me personally, that's not what I gain from it. But yeah, I think that the part that I enjoy is that tapping into the food chain, or getting a little bit closer to what I think draws me to appreciate the food, I guess, is that the whole process that goes along with that.
Yeah, I can't speak to the hunting aspect because I've actually never hunted, but fishing wise, I can remember as a kid, just like whenever we would catch these like crayfish in the creek, or we would catch fish and we would cook them up, how much different it feels to eat that versus something you buy in the store. And it feels a lot better because you know where it's coming from, and you're, like you said, you're part of that food chain now, and it's not so distant that, we had a different guest on the podcast, John Hershey, who was talking about bringing programs into schools to showing people where your food comes from. So there's people that think that milk, literally just falls out of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
So like this is such a good way to bring you back into that and kind of like show you where you came from and what makes you human, which is it's crazy.
Back to that. So when I was living in Alaska, I did some independent contracting work for a school system that was in Southeast. So there was 5 schools, and I was basically visiting each school and screening kids for like developmental delays. If I had a referral, I would go to these schools. We'd fly in, and they're very small villages. There might be like 18 kids in the whole school. I would fly into these small schools, and I'd go in, and it was like the second one that I went to. I can remember walking in. These are like one-room schools. They're pretty small. They have a couple different rooms within these schoolhouses, but I walk in, and I was like, these kids are butchering a moose right in the middle of school. So they had everyone K through 12 into their cafeteria, a moose they were quartering the moose. Somebody local, it was season had just opened up, the school was designated one license for a moose, right? So somebody had gotten one, they had brought it in, and boom, there they were processing this thing. So each one of the kids had their little job. It was the coolest thing. I was like, oh, talk about local education. Like, these kids came to appreciate, like, this is what happens, and this is how they eat. And then they all ate it, and I was like their cafeteria lunch, for how long? These kids were butchering the moose and breaking it down. There was, kids in 2nd grade and 3rd grade, helping run the grinders, and they're grinding up some. And they had some of the elders from the community would come in, and, they're teaching them, this is what we do and this is how you do it. And they're helping process this moose. And the whole time they're getting like appreciation for this animal, where they're getting their food. And then they eat it at school lunch. I was like, this is amazing. I went to the wrong school. This is what I want to do, man. Back home, our kids are eating chicken nuggets, so who knows where they're from.
It does make you feel bad seeing the animal get killed, and like you said, you don't take any like enjoyment. Well, at least personally, you don't take any enjoyment out of killing the animal, but that's life. Like, that thing's got to
die for us to eat.
Exactly, that's life. So being a part of that and seeing it gives you a lot more appreciation, than just buying it in a package.
Something's got to die for us to eat. Whether you're vegetarian, somehow that fertilizer's getting into that stuff. You're just withdrawing from it. If you withdraw from actually what happens, life and death. Me, it's just a way to appreciate it.
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Exactly. So one other thing I want to touch on with the activity. So you'd said, don't get a desk job. What do you do if you're stuck in a desk job? Like, that's your life. That's
get a standing desk is my option.
Because
as
I know
best you
there's.
can. I mean, I encourage people to get a standing desk or just change postures. Man. You just get up, stand up, walk around. Everybody looks at me cross-eyed. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if you want my honest opinion, you shouldn't be sitting. My back hurts right now. Like,
mine is
sitting right? I don't sit at all during work usually. I don't think that's the best way to approach it either. I think we just need to change postures. I think if we're sitting all the time, we're going to adapt to whatever position we're in. So your certain muscles in the system are going to tighten up to a sitting posture. Certain muscles are not getting used, so they're going to get weak. So those things end up in the long run causing problems. So I would encourage just getting out of that posture every 30 to 45 minutes. Just get up, move around, do something, sit back down. Even if it's just a matter of standing up for a minute or so. Sometimes that's unrealistic. I realize that, but my honest recommendation is, we just need to get off our butts. We have too much of it because you think about a majority of our day is all whatever we do. We're driving, we're sitting. We drive to work, we get to work, we probably sit. Most of it, a large majority of us sit through the day. We're in that posture. What do? We drive home. We get home, we sit, we eat dinner. After we eat dinner, we sit in front of the TV and we watch TV. So, the amount of time we spend sitting in that time is taking. It's not good for us.
Exactly.
I was talking with a chiropractor recently at a health clinic in the northeastern PA area that we were both at, and he had this stand for patients where he would take an iPad and it would somehow scan them and show them their posture at different points that they needed to adjust. I'm not a chiropractor, so I don't understand it very well, but after the patients kind of dwindled away, I was like, hey, can I do this iPad thing? It's like, sure. And stood there chest up thinking oh, my posture is great. I don't have any problems. He pretty much told me my posture was garbage. And I was trying to tease out any recommendations that he had just about posture. And he also brought up the standing desk thing. And he said that the main problem is, at least in his opinion through the lens of a chiropractor, is that when we're sitting down, we're often looking downwards at something on our desk, whether it be a phone or a laptop or pen and paper. And he told me that for every inch forward your skull is, you put an extra 12 pounds of pressure on your spine, meaning inch forward from being looking straight ahead. So for every inch, I guess you look down or your skull moves down towards the ground, you put an extra 12 pounds of pressure on your spine. And of course, if you're doing that all day at a desk, that's a ridiculous amount of pressure over the course of a day.
Now you got me consciously thinking about how I'm sitting here.
I've been thinking a lot during lecture.
15 seconds and then we're all going to be back to this.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it, and I talk about it every day. Yeah, and then it's the same thing. We read these research studies, and it all sounds good and great. But I have bad posture. I look at me now. I'm a slump back in my chair. I don't know anybody that just sits in good posture all the time. And it does. It increases disc pressure and it increases stress that we have to certain joints and muscles, and that leads to problems over the time. My recommendation is to change postures frequently. Just try to get different postures mixed in throughout your day. Whether that's stand up, move around, at lunchtime go for a little bit of a walk, do something.
Sounds good. All right, third point. What was that?
Yeah, what was that?
Who knows?
I'm about out of water here too.
Yeah, we can take a quick pause if you want.
What was it? So we went through nutrition, exercise. What else?
Just tossing out ideas because I truthfully can't remember. Maybe sleep. I don't know.
Yeah, sleep's important. I don't know. I mean, I vary between that one. I think it's all dependent on a lot of things, and it's like anything else. You can read yourself blue in the face on the research studies, and I love research, and I love the whole bias, as professionals, that's what we're taught to bias or basis everything that we do on, some type of research, and it's all great, but then same thing, I think, you can go crazy with this stuff, we talked about this before too. Sleep's good. And back to like the exercise thing, I don't think there's overtraining. I think there's under recovery a lot of times. If you vary your training and not do the same thing all the time, I think you can train a lot harder than what we think we can, and be good at it. However, we do need to recover, and recovery can take a lot of different phases, sleep one, nutrition, back to the beginning, nutrition, and a lot of other things we can do to recover. So yeah, recovery is extremely important. And I think that's probably where I've missed a lot of that's where my learning has really evolved over the years, because at some point you have to relearn to start recovering a little bit better. Otherwise you just end up in the gutter.
I feel like mental recovery is kind of a big thing too, as far
extremely, yeah. There's a lot on that right now, neurologically, and that's as big as anything. That's a big risk and injury risk, for athletes, and there's all kinds of monitoring that we're talking about, blood glucose levels. We can, there's monitors now that we can, what our ready state is, our neurological conditioning and, heart rate variability and all this stuff, that stuff I've dabbled in that too. And that's a real thing, I think it's important, very important. Yeah. I mean, as important as the workout part is the recovery phase. And if you're not getting good recovery, you're definitely not getting a good workout.
Yeah. And something that's like becoming increasingly popular is stress relief type things like meditation, getting more mindfulness and just, relaxing is a big component of things too. I'm not saying go overboard and watch TV all the time, but, you got to take a couple minutes a day to just
whatever it is
that
relaxes you.
Yeah.
Could be read a book, whatever it is, you take relax a little bit.
Not to go back
and sleep, back to that's important too. I mean, if there's anything that really, if I'm not sleeping good, that'll get me as wound as anything, and that'll throw my heart rate variability way off if I'm not sleeping.
How do you monitor your heart rate variability?
You just measure your heart rate,
True.
So you keep track of your heart rate, and there's a lot of different things. You can get monitors that really will tell you what your variability is.
Yeah,
it's
the
ability for it to change. If it stays kind of the same, that you're not in a good neurological state. So the ability for your heart to kind of adapt to the situation you're in, so whether I'm sitting here right now or I'm sprinting down the road, the ability for my neurological system, right, to kind of cue into that and change in variability, and that variability is what they're measuring with that.
Which is why you would want an increased heart rate variability.
Right, it's adaptability essentially is where you're at, and you'll see like with overtraining or under recovery, or whatever you want to call it, that variability you don't get much rise. It'll be just elevated, and then it'll stay there, and then you're not getting that up and the down swings.
Right. From what I understand, it's predicated on. So you have two like nervous systems, if you will. Your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, meaning your sympathetic is your fight or flight, and your parasympathetic is your rest and digest. The point is that you don't want to be in this dull medium, because maybe you always have like stress hormones like cortisol flowing through your blood. And you can never get back to that full rest state, because if you can't get back to that full rest state, then you can't max out your quote unquote fight or flight, which you want to when you're working out.
You want to be able to come out of it too.
Right.
So that's where your cortisol levels, and then if you stay in that sympathetic that's where an overtraining syndrome is essentially you're overriding that sympathetic system, and that's where you even just not sleeping, you're going to dip into that sympathetic response, and you can speak to this probably more in depth than any of us. But that sympathetic response there's a lot of hormones involved with that. They do damaging things, atrophy of muscle. Yeah. There's a lot of things there that aren't necessarily great survival technique for body. However, if we stay in that too long, we have some problems, right?
Yep, for sure.
So the reason that I asked how you're monitoring it is because I know a lot of people buy things with infrared.
I don't like technology.
Infrared lights. slowly becoming on the other end of the spectrum, just for fun, experimental purposes. I've been looking into buying in. Have you heard of the Aura rings?
Yes.
So
Sleep
that
ring.
yeah, so not only will they monitor your sleep, but they do so by measuring, like, largely through pulse rhythms. And since it's constantly giving you this 24/7 feedback of your pulse rhythm, you also know exactly what your heart rate variability is. So I'm looking into getting one of those as well in
You
the
like
near
technology.
future.
I need to read the book Unplugged.
I don't feel like I'm
You're going to have a blood glucose monitor on one arm,
That's
the
what I'm
Aura ring
saying.
on another arm.
true. I'm gonna augment myself.
Eating your bits of fat for the ketogenic diet.
It depends on the type of technology. So, like, I feel, I guess, quote unquote, plugged in with technology to help me learn more about my body. But at the same time, I will delete all my social media platforms throughout the academic year. So, throughout the majority of the year for the past couple years now, just because I don't want that distraction. So, I guess it kind of depends.
Yeah. No,
on,
I get it. I mean, the learning purpose of it is it's good. I do the same thing. Sometimes I'll use it. I don't like using it. I'm not good with, a computer will crash as soon as I walk in the room. Like, I'm just not good with that type of stuff. But I like learning about it, so that's what's better to learn about it than do it on yourself, so.
Yeah. So you just take your pulse, you just sit here, listen, look at your watch, and then
Yeah, well,
write it down
you
or
can,
something.
I've used heart rate monitors,
Mhm.
and they're somewhat accurate, or I'll just do, in the morning or at night, there's different things that I'll use and see what my heart rate is, and just in very global terms, in general terms, and just be like, man, I feel not good today. Like I'm dragging. Like, what's my heart rate? And then like I
What's your
track that
resting
for a
like
while.
normally?
What's that?
What's your resting
About
at
54.
normally? Gotcha.
So, all right. So, say you have you start noticing a decrease in your heart rate variability. What are you gonna do to switch it up?
More recovery.
Okay.
Yeah, more recovery to it. Like, I'll back off on the intensity level of the workout that day. Try there's different things like breathing techniques and different stuff so you can do and that seems to work good for me. It has worked good for me. Just like, I think it's just a matter of taking my mind off of everything else and making it run. And I think that helps. And I just kind of decrease the intensity of my day as best I can, or at least what I can control. That's all I do.
What kind of breathing techniques, like Wim Hof breathing techniques, or
I've tried all that stuff too. So breath holds and that back to like the sympathetic nervous system. Really, that's what he's trying to do, is trying to give the sympathetic workout, or you're trying to drive that nail in between that response. Control that response a little bit better.
You have some pressure receptors in your body called baroreceptors, and you can, if you plug your nose, and they call it Valsalva maneuver, where you just really build up the pressure in your body, it'll send these false signals to your brain thinking that your blood pressure is really high. So your brain's gonna adapt and tell it to, chill out. So you're gonna dilate your arteries and let things, get a little lower pressure, and that's like that's kind of like the mechanism behind some of these breathing things.
Dang, that's crazy.
There's some that have like your carbon dioxide and sensitivity, and there's a bunch of different breathing techniques, and I'm not going to say I'm an expert on any of them because I try them, and if it makes me faster to go to sleep, great. Like, maybe I learned something there, or why maybe I'm in sympathetic response a little bit too much, and that brought me out of it, and maybe that allowed me to fall asleep. Either way, I've used a bunch of different like box breathing. There's like the Wim Hof method. I call it box breathing. I don't know if that's the right name. And actually, it's like a 4. You're counting in seconds. So your breath in, like a quick breath in, 4 seconds. You're going to hold for 7, and then exhale for 8, and then you just continue that cycle, right? And then you do cycles of that, right? And then essentially that's it. I'll do that maybe 3 or 4 cycles of like 5 or 6 reps, and then it seems to help kind of calm me down for bed. Or I'll do that a lot of times. I'll do like the breath holds while with a workout, and that type of stuff to kind of help,
like in between sets.
I'll do it during, so like a run, or
gotcha.
whole breath holder, but there's a bunch of different breath hold stuff. But with the heart rate variability, it's anything that I find can help bring me back down, get off of caffeine a little bit.
Yeah.
Any type of stimulant, try to, I need to bank off of that a little bit for the next couple of days. Main thing is probably just the workout, stress levels, of the day. If I'm real busy, probably not sleeping much, probably not eating as well as I should be, and
it's a vicious cycle because then you start taking in more caffeine and then you're amped up later in the night and you can't sleep as much, and then the next day, you had less sleep because you took in more caffeine, you had that stressful day, and then you take more caffeine and it just like keeps going and going. So yeah, that's pretty that happens to me a good bit with school. But so I think it's pretty cool. There's kind of like one guy that I listen to podcasts, Dr. Chatterjee. He talks about the 4 pillars of health, really. So like activity, which we covered, diet we covered, sleeping is a big one he talks about, which we covered, and also relaxation, which is also what we covered. So that's pretty cool. What do you think out of those 4? What do you think is the most important that you would focus on? Because I think, at least for me, it's hard to juggle changing 4 things all at once. Like if somebody's in a say they're in like a tough spot and they're not doing what they should be in any of these areas. At least for me personally, I feel like it's pretty hard to just switch everything all at once. I feel like it's probably better to focus on one thing, get it mastered, and move and try and get the next thing in, because you can't really develop habits if you're changing everything all at once.
Right. A hierarchy, obviously, activity level, and I think your diet. I think diet probably most important. I think all of them are going to be affected if you don't have a good diet. Recovery, rest. You're not going to sleep as well as you should if you have eaten a bunch of junk.
Yeah.
You can't work out like you should if you eat a bunch of junk. Personally, I don't know. I think right now, if I'm trying to put a hierarchy on them, I truly think they all work together. Though you gotta figure out all of them in some fashion, or try to get better at all of them in some way. But I'd say diet, exercise, right there are the 2.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I don't think I have any more deep dives into health unless you want to add one. One thing that I did want to bring up, I know this opens the door for other tangents, so I'll let you guide this as you feel is needed. I know you're very well read and listen to a lot of podcasts as well. Is there any books that have really impacted you that you want to put out there for other people that, if you could, flip a switch and I wish everyone read this book, I wish everyone had this knowledge in their mind. Is there any ones that come to the forefront of your mind? It doesn't just have to be books. It can be
My Side of the Mountain.
Is that a book?
It is a book.
By who?
No, I don't even know.
Oh,
it was the first book I read in 2nd grade. Great book, by the way. One is really, I don't know if I can boil it down to just one, really. There's a lot of them that I like. The most recent ones kind of stick out in my mind, but I wouldn't say they're the most important. Jordan Peterson has the 12 Rules for Life. That's a good book. I like that one just because it puts a framework out. There's nothing outstanding about the book in other terms, but I liked it. It made sense to me. I like that book. Extreme Ownership. That's a great one.
Just finished that pretty recently.
Did you? Yeah. So that's a great. I liked. The book wasn't that great, but I think the structural framework to the book was great. I think that everybody can withdraw. That's a way to approach life. You take ownership for everything. Then if you, it's kind of going back to that whole how you approach things with a learning type approach. It's if you take ownership for everything, it just changes your outlook on everything, right? So I'm no longer complaining about why is administration making me do this, blah blah blah. Okay, well, it's an opportunity to get better at something, whatever it is. But that's a good book. It's another one. David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me. It's a good book. I kind of like that kind of stuff.
He's a maniac, yep.
American Buffalo is another good one. Did you ever read that?
No. What's that about?
Steve Rinella. It's about the buffalo.
Oh, okay.
It's about the American buffalo and how we just screwed the whole thing
Steve
up.
Fernello's the meat eater dude.
It's actually a lot of history in that. So like how really the buffalo has changed how we are now today's world. That's a good one.
But he has the meat eater, like it's called meat eater.
Yeah.
That shit.
And he has books. He's real. I like his kind of approach to writing.
Gotcha.
He has a couple good ones, but American Buffalo is most recent. Trying to think of another one.
That's a pretty good list for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of them I could probably just.
I got to start
keep
some of
going.
these
I
up.
have to look at my bookshelf at home, but
I have a list of about 40 books I need to get through right now, but I'll throw those on.
yeah.
Yeah, Nick.
How to Light a Fire. That's a good. Anything Jack London, man.
What's that?
Jack London's the man.
I read those in
They're
grade
easy
school.
reads,
Yeah.
They're easy reads.
Call of the
and they're
Wild.
like the best.
Yeah.
Call of
for
the
sure.
Wild.
What's the White
To Light a
Fang?
Fire.
I think. Yeah.
White Fang.
Yeah.
You know?
Nick introduced me to the Goodreads app, so it's essentially just an app where you have like
Summary.
you can have the queue of the books you want to read and see what you're like. Each time you read a book, you mark it as read and you rate it, and so then it's like a social media platform where you see what your friends have rated books. And I have a ridiculous queue now thanks to the Goodreads app. I think I have like 150 books in my want to read list. I'm like, man, I'm never gonna get through these. So it's like every time you listen to like a podcast or something, like someone you look up to like highly recommends some book. Yeah.
Yes, I know.
Or they'll reference
Tools of
other
Titans,
podcasts.
like,
I'm
That's a good
actively
one.
reading that right now.
Tim Ferriss, like every podcast, if you listen to that one, try to read all the books that he recommends.
Good luck.
Through every podcast, it's like, I just got 5 more books. Like,
Yeah.
Next day, I got another 5.
Yeah.
Takes me 3 months to get through Tools of Titans.
Yeah.
But no,
That's
there's
a
a bunch
thick
of good
book
ones
in and
out
of
there.
itself too.
Oh man, it's just
600 or something.
I don't
pages
get a lot
maybe
of time
more.
to read either. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So like I end up getting like lost. So like you take a couple like even just a week off of like reading the book, and you kind of lose your momentum in it, and that becomes hard. That's why I like the shorter ones are probably work better for me. But Blinkist, you ever use that?
Mm.
I used that for a little bit. It's an app that you can get summary essentially. It's like Cliff Notes on the book. You can read it or you can listen to it. So it's all.
That's
You got to pay for the subscription, but you can blow through a bunch of books and like really fine tune the ones that you think are going to be beneficial.
nice. Sweet.
Yeah. I don't think we. Oh, go ahead.
One more question I want to throw out there. Sorry, I just a couple of tidbits I think are applicable for like, I don't know, tangible little tips for people to take away that might have listened to this, and the things you are saying really resonate with them. If someone, say in high school or undergrad and college, is trying to learn more about being a DPT, or they're like certain that that's what they want to do, they really want to be a physical therapist. Is there anything that you wish you knew about physical therapy, no matter how specific or broad, that you didn't know in maybe undergrad or high school, that you would tell them?
I think it's just understanding what it is that you're. I think it took me a lot of years to really understand what the job was. To be honest with you, you're bombarded with a lot of things, a lot of boxes you got to check, just like medical school. Like when you get out and you start practicing, it's going to be, you got to check so many stinking boxes to even get to the point where you can actually treat the patient that's in front of you, and what your role is within that healthcare system. So I think the biggest thing is like, what is a physical therapist? We're considered the doctors of movement, mechanical natured doctor. So anything, the musculoskeletal system is really what we're treating, but that can be pretty broad sometimes. I think if we really took a holistic approach to that and not try to confine it to just the musculoskeletal system, I think we'd be better off, to be honest. But, bone, muscle, and neurological involvement in that, that's what we're treating, that's what we're there for. There's so many settings within physical therapy and so many disciplines you can go and so many things you can kind of dive into. The career as a whole is, vast. You can change jobs within the same job a lot.
You can move to Alaska.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great thing. I mean, I think is terms of that I can find a job a lot of places, very easily, so I can go wherever I want to and find a job and not have to worry about, what am I going to find a job there? It's not too bad. It might not be in the setting that I really want, but I can find something to make a living and make it work, and just kind of where your role is, I guess, within that medical system. I think is the big thing that I think I didn't understand, like going into it. You think of physical therapy as, it's like a glorified trainer. And I don't say that in negative context either. Like that's what I thought of it. I thought of, athletes, and I thought of all that stuff. There's so much more to it, and when you start really breaking it down, what you're doing and how your role can assist in the care of that patient, not just, the medical doctor, okay, this person has knee pain, if you're a primary care physician, you're triaging that, what could this be? If it's back pain, do we need, is this back, is this musculoskeletal system? Is this another system that we need to investigate? And if think it's musculoskeletal or that, you ship them over like PT, and I have to understand my role in that whole thing too. If it doesn't seem like to me that it gets musculoskeletal, like maybe communication is my role there. Like, hey, this doesn't make sense to me. Can we do some more testing or do some imaging or whatever it may be? And it might be as simple as, I think you need to go see this person. So helping that whole system and where you play and what you can do to help that patient as within that system, rather than just, I think, focus on, hey, there's knee pain, do this, this, and this.
Right.
So.
All right. Hey, that was a cool podcast. Thanks
Yeah,
for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys.
I know you're pretty off the grid, but is there anywhere that people can find you if they want to learn more about your world? I know you're not...
Look in the woods.
Yeah, all right, that's fine.
No, I don't even think I have anything active as far as social media. I work in McAlisterville. You can look at my clinic. Outside of that, no, probably not. Yeah.
All right.
Look in the woods.
You might see me. If you're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you might see me running down the road or something.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
All right, thank you, dude.
Thanks.
Hey,
It was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys.
See everyone. All right, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. Please track us down on social media. Our Facebook is Insights of All Trades. Our Instagram is at Insights of All Trades. Our Twitter is at IOAT Podcast. And you can find us on Gmail. It is insightsofalltrades@gmail.com. So please just send us in your insights. It would mean a lot to us and a lot to everyone else. Meaning, send in any tips or tricks you've learned through your trade or your passion that you think everyone would benefit from knowing. So until next time, adios.